Hello, my name is Raeed Kabir. I'm a math and economics student here at UA, and I'm excited to present some work joint with Michael Price in the economics department. I want you to first imagine a corporation like Amazon is perceiving policy uncertainty on the horizon. Maybe in Congress there's this bill on regulations that might hurt business operations. Maybe there's a tax cut. Who knows? But empirical evidence shows that policy uncertainty itself is costly to firms. And so firms have incentive to alleviate this uncertainty, and we propose that you can do this two ways. Okay? You can either purchase political candidates through political giving or lobbying, or you can buy the goodwill of the public by doing charity and going and helping out the community. And maybe you might say in the second case, look, regulators, I'm doing good work for the people. You don't need to regulate me. So we focus on the first branch, purchasing political candidates. And the question is then, if I have a fixed budget of money to give to political candidates and I'm a firm, how do I choose among all of the possible people going up for election that year, right? There's so many in every election cycle. Maybe I might be interested in giving to the Republican incumbent in the House who is the chair of the environmental committee, or I may be thinking about someone who oversees fiscal budget for the year, right? It's very unclear, and we want to estimate the substitution patterns in what characteristics drive my donation decision. So first I'm going to talk about what really estimating preferences means. And I'll give you a contrived example. I'm going to walk through it slowly with you guys. And then I'm going to show you the data that I'm working with and how we plan to estimate these substitution patterns in my setting. Okay, so in a microeconomic theory class, you might see some sort of problem like this. And all it says is, I want to choose a bundle X that maximizes my objective function, maybe my utility, subject to some constraints like budget. Okay, and this is theory. This is saying what would a rational agent maybe do in a setting where I have to make a constrained choice. But in our world, we have data. We don't see people's utility functions. We don't know what makes people happy completely, right? And all we see are maybe choices, right? And the characteristics of the goods upon which we're choosing from. And this is actually just ChatGPT data, the 10 individual, I just asked it to make something up, 10 individuals and the choices they make between two cereals. What's the price of the cereal? What's the sugar content of the cereal? And which one do they choose? And the importance behind all of this is I want to know what do people like, and in order to be able to say, I want you to buy this thing, how can I change my product to get you to do what I want you to do? Okay? So bear with the notation for me. Bear with me through the rotation right now. I promise there's a punchline at the end. So take a rational agent I who's choosing a cereal from a set cap J. Okay, and the set has items 1 and 2. You can think this is cereal 1, this is cereal 2. An individual I is going to buy 1 unit from this set. Okay, the utility that I get from buying J is this number, Uij, right here. Okay, and it's equal to this combination of things. Notice Xj has a J subscript. What does that mean? These are product level characteristics. Okay, theta doesn't have a subscript. This is on purpose. This is a population level taste parameter. It tells you across the entire population, across all of the goods, how much do I tend to like price? Am I super sensitive to price? Do I like sugar? Do I not like sugar? Am I super sensitive to that? These are numbers that capture my taste for things. Okay? And so if you multiply these vectors out, you could see that this utility number is equal to a combination of all these observable characteristics plus this epsilon ij. And this is the important part here. I don't want my demand system to be too inflexible. For example, I need to account for the fact that I don't know everything about you. I don't know about these random idiosyncratic shocks that might make me purchase cereal 1 over cereal 2. For example, cereal 2 might be cheaper and I might be a super cheap person. Cereal 2 might be higher in sugar and I might love sugar. But you might still see in the data that I purchased cereal 1 because maybe I have a fond childhood memory of my mom buying me cereal 1 and that's why I bought it, right? And the fact that we don't know everything about you requires us to allow for these kinds of random errors. And so what we do, we assume that these errors are drawn from a very specific distribution and cleverly chosen distribution so that we can kind of integrate out this error, and we're left with this likelihood function that tells me what's the probability that I choose good J as a function of the observable characteristics and that theta parameter that I want. There's nothing invisible in this expression anymore, right? And so if you know math stats, you would say, okay, I know what to do with this. I know I want to do maximum likelihood estimation, and I can estimate this parameter out. Basically what that means is what choice of theta rationalizes the data to look the way it does. Okay, and I ran this in Python really quickly, and it said, oh, this ChatGPT, these 10 individuals that ChatGPT generated, they're super price sensitive and they kind of like sugar. Okay? So in my setting, I have political giving data. Okay? I have the universe of transactions from political action committees for corporations to political candidates. What does that mean? Every corporation has these political action committees. They're deciding where do I give money to donate to politicians, and I have every single one of those donations over the past 23-ish years, okay? And this is a lot of data, and in fact, in 1 year, you might see something like 900 candidates going up for federal election and 1,600 firms donating to them. Okay, and I observe things about the firms themselves. These are like the agents who are buying, but I also observe things about the candidates. These are like my serials, right? I know their party. I know that whether they're an incumbent for that seat or if they're a challenger for that seat. I know what kind of committee they might be affiliated if they are an incumbent. So now I'm going to tell you how I plan to estimate this, and it's going to sound a little silly maybe at first, but we're going to use recreational demand models, which were developed by environmental economists. And why environmental economists use them are to estimate the value that people have for typically non-priced goods, things that there's no market for. So quality of clean water. What is my valuation of clean water? What is my valuation of a public park? What do I value fishing in this lake versus that lake, right? And the reason this is really important in their setting is because they want to know how much tax do I levy in order to preserve clean water? How much investment do I make in improving this park? How much do federal programs need to allocate? And how much are taxpayers willing to pay? And these kinds of models rely on the cost that people are willing to pay to go to these sites and the time that they're willing to spend to travel, for example. And so I'm going to make an analogy between the decision that they make in this recreational demand setting and my setting. Okay? So the choice problem that I want to be analogous to is a fisherman choosing a lake to fish at among many lakes that they could fish at, whereas in my setting, I have a firm who's choosing a politician to donate to among many alternatives. If I want to model the costs, the fisherman has to think about what are the different relative costs traveling to each of the lakes, whereas in my setting, I want to think about the reciprocal of the probability of a candidate that I give winning an election and influencing policy down the road. The competition side, you can think about fish stocks, the number of other fishermen in the lake who are trying to win the hand of the politician in my setting, right? That's the kind of analogy. Aesthetics would be like, is the lake pretty? Is there, like, what's the size of it? Is there a lot of sunshine, sun coverage, that kind of thing? Whereas in my setting, I'm thinking about political candidate characteristics like the party, those kinds of things that I mentioned before. And then you want to think maybe about something like a quality shifter, like on a given day, there's cloud coverage, there's maybe rain going on, and this is happening across all of my lakes, and how do I choose between them? And in my setting, policy uncertainty is happening. It's ubiquitous across the entire United States. How do I choose who to give to in the face of policy uncertainty? Okay, and so the short story is this is a new problem. We haven't really thought about purchasing political candidates before, whereas demand estimation frameworks have been around for a while, and they're used typically to think about like cereal, cars, housing, right, that kind of demand. So we have to be a little bit creative and think outside of the box, but I'm excited to, next steps, estimate the thing that I just said I would do. So I'm opening up the floor for questions now.
Thank you for the talk. In your toy model that you had of like cereal, your theta vector was just like agent independent population vector. I guess I was wondering if you could maybe speak a little more on that. Like, why does that cover what unique things that different companies might be looking for in terms of like political candidates? Or am I misunderstanding like the role of theta in this kind of model?
Yeah, I mean, this is what I'm looking to estimate. All of this is so that I can actually end up with like an output of my code that gives me numbers in this vector form. The idea is that I will like think about what are the observables that I have in front of me, right? And that's going to define the x, and I need an appropriate number of theta parameters to multiply with these x's, right? So I will choose first all of the observable characteristics I can find about the candidate in my setting, but in this case, the cereal, these were the ones that came to mind for me. And then that will immediately like populate what the theta parameter should be. Does that make sense?
So I was wondering, how do you measure the policy uncertainty at any like given time?
That's right. So that's an important, we have empirical measures of policy uncertainty, and there's like a very famous 2016 paper where these economists take the frequency of news articles being published and then what fraction of them are related to economic policy uncertainty, and they create this index, and it's very widely used, but it tracks very closely with big moments of policy uncertainty in our country's history too.
And are these the tools that most economists use? Are there other tools that matter?
So the fact that I'm saying demand estimation and all this stuff, right? Like demand is probably 50% of the vocabulary people associate with economics, the other being supply. So I'm not trying to say that this is what all economists use, and most probably don't have to use these kind of discrete choice models in their research, but this is a fraction of the tools that give us the power to study preferences of agents, and I think that's pretty cool.